They didn't scream in terror. Theron Myrric said softly. They screamed in disbelief. The room held its breath, though no lungs drew it in. The laser plasma display floated inches above the obsidian table, cycling through the last 30 seconds of a vanished world. A planetary skyline fractured into fragmented light. Trees bent as if bowing to some unseen force. Civilians sprinted through streets that dissolved beneath them mid-step. The sound, twisted by radiation scatter, was an orchestra of chaos, the pitch-shifted wails of a species that never expected their final moment to come during breakfast. Theron stood still, hands behind his back, the gray folds of his diplomat's coat catching the glint of the council chamber's illumination beams. His expression didn't shift. A lesser man might have looked away, might have let the footage loop once and then disabled it, but not him. This was the third time through. He'd watch it a fourth. They just disappeared, murmured Kellen Dresk, voice low, analytical. The strategic analyst kept his gaze locked on the projection. No atmospheric burn, no seismic activity, no energy discharge signature, no survivors, no explanation, added Bran Vordax, arms crossed, brow like carved stone. The three stood alone in a temporary holding room within the Nexus's northern axis, bare walls, high air circulation, and the faint scent of ionized polymers seeping through the vents. Sterile like an interrogation bay, redesigned by architects who'd never known war. A synthetic chime rang overhead, signaling the council's session start in 25 minutes. Theron didn't move. They left us a final message, he said, motioning subtly to the display. But it wasn't a call for help, it was a death certificate. The hologram flickered again. A child turned toward the sky and pointed, then disintegrated in a swirl of particle scatter. The image froze on her outstretched hand. Just pixels now. You think it's deliberate, Kellen said. I know it is, Theron replied. Kellen turned toward him, the laser display casting shadows across his gaunt features. The others won't believe you. They'll cite stellar anomalies, fault lines, entropy acceleration. They don't believe because they fear what belief would require, Theron said. His eyes hadn't left the frozen image. It would require a response. Bran Vordax stepped forward. His uniform bore no rank insignia. Earth's delegation had decided against overt military presence. Still, nothing about his posture concealed his nature. He walked like a man who measured threats by how fast he could disable them. The Nexus security feeds show another system went dark last cycle, he said. Same signature, same loop. 30 seconds, replayed without end. Kellen's brow furrowed. How many is that? 7, Theron said. There was a silence. No emptiness, just tension folded in layers. The kind of silence you could feel in your teeth. Then the door slid open. The figure that entered was tall, his face an angular lattice of ridges and luminous grooves. Quolvorath of the Threxan sphere, first voice of the council's inner chamber. Ambassador Myrric, he said, the words soaked in polite disdain. Still wallowing in ghosts, Theron didn't turn. Ghosts have a way of returning, counselor. Sometimes they wear new skins. Quolvorath let the insult glide past. Your display of dramatics may impress your Earth military, but here we prefer logic. Then apply it, Theron said, finally facing him. 7 systems lost, 0 survivors. A pattern of encroachment that traces an arc. That's not a meteorological fluke, it's a containment strategy. The aliens' ridges pulsed with faint irritation. You accuse a force we cannot identify of executing military precision. I accuse the Council of denying reality, because facing it would mean reopening doors you welded shut 12,000 years ago. A pause, then a quiet hiss escaped the alien's nostrils. Earth, he said, remains young. Your blood still runs hot. We remember what that costs. You remember silence, Theron replied. We remember consequence. For a moment neither moved. Then Quolvorath turned. You'll be called to speak, eventually. I'd advise you not to bring theatrics. The chamber favors restraint. The door sealed behind him with a gentle hiss. Kellen exhaled slowly. You just baited one of the 5 founding voices. Theron returned to the display. The loop began again. A blue sun flared. The shadow crept in. We're not baiting them, Theron said. We're warning them. The chamber lights dimmed slightly. A shift in cycle power. The air grew subtly cooler. Bran stepped closer to the far wall, glancing at the embedded readouts. "We're being moved to pre-council staging," he muttered. "This section's drawing energy down." Theron didn't respond. Instead, he touched the control node. The image flickered and collapsed into static. "Do you know what makes it worse?" he asked, almost to himself. "It's not the destruction, it's the repetition." Kellen looked at him. "It's like the universe itself can't forget what happened," Theron continued. "Like it's trying to remind us, over and over again, because we've forgotten too much." A junior council assistant entered then, breath uneven, voice clipped. "Ambassador Myrric, the council is requesting preliminary alignment data from Earth's delegation before the next session begins," and the assistant hesitated, scanning his tablet. "I'm to inform you, the Arari system is within projected trajectory. Based on current vectors, it's next." Theron froze. A shadow crossed his expression, not fear, but something colder, recognition. Kellen's mouth opened slightly. "That archive." "I know," Theron said. He stepped forward, eyes on the blank display. The laser light still lingered faintly in the air like smoke after a shot. He could almost see the image replaying again, though he'd shut it off. The child pointing skyward, the light swallowing her. "Get me a full path projection," he said to Kellen. "To the Arari vault?" Kellen asked. "No," Theron said, voice low. "From the first vanished system to this one. All of them. I want to map the curve." "Why?" "Because I think it's not just erasing worlds," he said. "I think it's drawing a line." As Kellen moved to obey, Bran looked toward the corridor. "They're not going to believe it until the Arari archive burns." Theron nodded once. "Then we'll make them see it before it does." The door opened again. This time no one entered. Just the automated signal. "Council begins in 15 minutes. As they exited the room, the assistant lingered behind. His eyes drifted to the inactive display. Then, just as he turned away, the system glitched, flickering back for a moment. The loop resumed. A scream. A blur. The sky collapsing. Then black. Theron sat alone in the temporary command alcove, his finger dragging lines across the cracked surface of a repurposed operations table, tracing trajectories that weren't marked, inventing order where none had been declared. Dust caught the strip light above, gathering in the creases of the fractures, like forgotten stars in a broken sky. Behind him, a heads-up display pulsed faintly with the latest system loss. No sound played, only the tremble of light across the panel, indicating another vanished planet. Another silence folded into the galactic ledger. "You're quiet," Kellen said, entering with a datapad tucked under one arm. "That's rarely a comfort." Theron didn't glance up. "I'm listening." "To what?" "The pattern." "It's not finished speaking." Kellen placed the datapad on the table, careful not to touch the sketched lines. "If you're right, the Arari archive isn't just next on the path. It's the terminus." Theron's eyes lifted. "Explain." "The lattice vector. Every vanished system wraps the Arari homeworld in a curve, not a spiral, a binding. Like the archive isn't a target, it's a lock." A shadow passed across Theron's face. Kellen tapped a command into the plasma display, and a layered projection opened. Planetary nodes, recorded vanishings, residual waveforms, all orbiting the quiet blue sphere at the center, Arari Prime. "We always assumed the Vexar moved randomly, but look at this formation. It's geometric, symmetrical in decay rate, system weight, and signal collapse." "It's an algorithm," Theron muttered. "Or a memory." Theron pushed off from the table and walked to the viewport. Beyond the reinforced glass, celestial nexus glinted like a frozen wheel. Light shimmered in fractures across the outer hull, battle scars from a time the Council had erased from sanctioned history. Kellen folded his arms. "Theron, if that archive holds records from the war before peace, and the Vexar's drawn to it, then they're not a mindless force," Theron said. "They're searching for something we buried." He didn't need to say more. The Arari archive wasn't just a data vault, it was myth wrapped in encryption. A forbidden vault beneath a world draped in neutrality, housing schematics, thought forms, and accounts the Council had quarantined before Earth had even cracked sublight barriers. A new figure stepped into the room without knocking. Bran Vordax, taller than both of them, shoulders squared with the stillness of one who'd survived slaughter, not just studied it. Security nets pulsing around the Arari sphere. Brand said, voice low, 5 ships gone dark along its perimeter. In the last 6 cycles, Council is logging it as sensor drift. And you believe that? Kellen asked. Brand didn't answer. Instead, he unpinned the service clasp from his coat, a dull coin of scorched alloy, half melted, half scored. The Earth-Vulcan skirmishes had left him with scars stitched under his skin. The clasp had belonged to the 3rd Outer Colony, devoured before reinforcements arrived. Ilari's hiding something, Brand continued. We can't wait for approval. Therian nodded. Then we don't. Brand tapped into the comm relay embedded in his wrist. I'm taking the Ashrith under cloaked protocol. Give me 6 hours above the archive. I want a clean scan of its underlayers. Theron raised an eyebrow. You're going alone? No team, Brand replied. Less trace, fewer chances for Council trackers. Kellen, load the lattice analytics into my core nav. If the Vexar's signal spike tracks to the Arari vault, I'll catch it. You know they'll follow, Kellen warned. The Council's watching for divergence. Brand cracked the faintest smile. Let them watch. I don't hide what I'm willing to defend. Without another word, he turned and left, boots echoing across the deck like punctuation marks in a language of violence long unspoken. Theron returned to the cracked table, gaze distant. We should have burned those archives a century ago. Kellen hesitated. Or maybe we should have read them. The Ashrith detached from Nexus quietly, a whisper amid the mechanical ballet of orbital alignment. Its hull shimmered with refraction fields, bending visibility until it vanished entirely, even from side-channel sensors. Brand settled into the command node, fingers sliding across the adaptive interface. The interior was stripped, bare console, stripped-down autonav, and a rotating viewport feed offering direct visual of the darkness ahead. He didn't need full diagnostics. He needed stealth. The Arari world rose before him, blue veined with crystalline structures that caught ambient starlight like a cracked lens. From orbit it resembled a frozen nerve. The archive lay 3 layers below the planet's equator, shielded by kinetic armor, gravitic buffers, and cultural arrogance. The Arari had never allowed an outsider to set foot inside its vault. Brand stared at the system's central star. It was too quiet. He remembered a different sky, one filled with fire. The 3rd colony had exploded with no warning. No orbit disruption, no warning signal, just sudden absence. His brother had been stationed on the orbital ring. Brand had never recovered a trace. The Ashrith sensors pinged. Motion. He minimized the alert and activated a cloaked feed. A small object slipped into range, then another. Twin shadow shapes, reflective curves masking drone cores. Council surveillance. Brand exhaled. So, you're watching. He didn't break course. The feed lit up again. The archive had activated a signal, weak old band repeating. Brand tuned in. It was a pulse, low frequency, rhythmic, not data, not communication, recognition, he muttered. What the hell are you reaching for? Then the ping changed. A lattice pulse echoed from deep within the vault, not outward, but upward, toward the sky, not to signal the Council, not to alert the planet, but to draw something in. Brand's breath caught. It was an invitation. He cut the feed. Back on Nexus, Kellen stared at the updated display, now populated with the Ashrith's last transmitted readings. The pulse data radiated in bands, forming a visual equation neither of them could solve. They're not protecting knowledge, he said. Theron stood nearby, eyes narrowed. They're preparing to use it. The table beneath him cracked again, as he pressed harder on the lines he'd drawn. Theron looked up. They think knowledge is sacred, he said. But some truths were buried for a reason. Kellen didn't reply. The laser display flickered, briefly overlaying a grainy signal received moments ago from Brand. It showed the Arari Archive's vault entrance, opening. The vault had opened, and nothing emerged. Theron stared at the laser plasma display inside Earth's off-record comms chamber, an old transit substation, now converted into a war room hidden 2 levels beneath the Nexus's diplomatic tower. The image from Brand's final burst transmission still looped above the table. Massive stonework split into 8 concentric rings, each one glowing faintly from within, as if remembering a heat it hadn't felt in epochs. Kellen swept his hand across the interface, changing layers, scrolling through archive symbols, bandwidth echoes, and linguistic fragments that didn't belong to any known council dialect. This doesn't match any Arari code, he muttered. And it's not machine language either. It's a lattice echo, he added, jaw tightening. They're not just reacting to the Vexar, they're mimicking. The Ron's head turned sharply. You're saying the Vexar aren't alien? I'm saying, Kellen hesitated, gaze fixed on the spiraling waveform, they might have been us. Before that thought could settle, the chamber's door slid open, silent but forceful. Bran entered without ceremony, coat half unzipped, expression drawn in dirt along his collar. He dropped his data prism onto the table without a word. The Ron tapped it, the laser display flared again, 3 star systems blinking red. The lattice is accelerating, Bran said flatly. Their paths tightening around Arari Prime, the curves no longer closing, it's folding. They're not just targeting the archive anymore, they're preparing to break into it. The Ron studied the display in silence, fingers curled against the table's edge. Kellen glanced between them. We don't have a full coalition yet. The Varn engineers are hesitating, and the Nalvek don't want to be seen aligning against the Council. We don't need hesitation, Bran snapped. We need action. We need timing, the Ron replied, voice low but steady. A response too early becomes a rebellion, one too late becomes a eulogy. Kellen flinched at that. There's more. He opened a hidden layer of the archive index. The central feed narrowed to a block of ancient Arari text, partially decrypted, barely readable. The translation crawled across the bottom of the screen. The lattice was born not to conquer, but to preserve. What it consumes, it remembers. Bran exhaled through clenched teeth. It's an imprint species, or a containment one, Kellen said, which means the Arari didn't just hide data down there, they buried something they wanted the galaxy to forget. A soft alert blinked on the sidewall feed. Coalition meeting underway. The Ron shut off the display. We move now. The room was hidden beneath Nexus Dock 6, once a council repair bay, now converted into a negotiation den. The Drovar stood in silence, 3 of them in armored exographs, stained from asteroid mining runs. Their leader, Kroon, shifted weight slightly, with each sentence, bones creaking under the suit's reactive pressure. The isotope exchange was not fulfilled, Kroon said, his voice scraping like stone dragged across ice. The Ron remained unflinching. You'll have it within 1 orbital cycle. Late promises carry interest, Kroon replied. Kellen started to speak, but Bran raised a hand. The tension simmered. To the right, a Kexan delegation, 3 silver-scaled warriors, curved spines lined with translator rigs, watched quietly. Their admiral, Vertal, stood slightly apart, fingers twitching intermittently. His eyes scanned everything, including exits. From the far side of the room, a single Arari observer watched from a shadowed corner. His feathers were dull gray, no rank, no robes, just silence. The Ron stepped forward. The Vexar have increased speed. Their curve now intersects orbit within 72 hours. We cannot afford hesitation. Our coalition forms here. Now, we act, or we are erased. Kroon grunted. Then give the command. They sealed the pact, not with words, not with formal signatures, just a glance, and a low nod. But as the drover exited, Bran narrowed his eyes at the Kexan admiral, who lingered too long before following. Later, in Earth's command chamber, Theron received confirmation. He leaked it, Bran said. Vertal fed the Council Comms Division the location of our meeting. Full data burst in exchange for amnesty and protected transport. Kellen swore under his breath. They'll burn our charter, he said. They'll do worse, Bran growled. They'll dismantle it, quietly, 1 delegate at a time. Theron remained still. The plasma display flickered as Nexus airspace surveillance drones came online, thermal shadows slipping between corridors, silent watchers bound by no diplomatic statute. He stepped toward the mission stack in the corner of the chamber, pulled out a rolled data scroll, and laid it atop the table, then set it ablaze. No spark, no flame. Just a controlled strip light burst across the carbon-reactive sheet. Why'd you do that? Kellen asked. That scroll contained our backup plan, Theron said, watching the strip blacken. Now it doesn't. Bran tensed. We don't erase options before we move. We erase decoys before they become liabilities, Theron replied. You think the Council won't trace that leak back to us? They will. And if they see we're hesitating, they'll cut us off before we launch. You're waiting too long, Bran shot back. We have half a fleet. That's enough. Let's strike now. Theron faced him. And if the archive reacts? If it unleashes what's inside? What if the Vexar are drawn not to destroy, but to rejoin something we buried? Then we adapt, Bran said, like we always do. Theron took a breath and moved toward the wall. He grabbed one of the Drover-forged tools from the supply crate, crafted to interlock modular shield plates across battle platforms. Heavy, engineered to withstand orbital pressures, it snapped in his hands. A clean break. Silence stretched between them. Theron dropped the broken tool onto the table. That's what fractured unity looks like. Bran looked down at the snapped edge. No repair would make it whole again. Go back to orbit, Theron said. Monitor the curve. If it shifts again, we move. Bran nodded once and left without another word. Kellen remained, eyes fixed on the display. 3 Council fleets had changed formation, shifting toward the Arari perimeter, watching, waiting. Theron, he said softly. If this fails, it won't, Theron replied. And if it does, then history will remember the scream before the silence. Theron's footsteps echoed down the primary axis of Celestial Nexus, hard and deliberate, each strike louder than protocol allowed. Council guards parted without command. He moved like someone who no longer feared consequence. In his left hand, he carried a compressed data core, smooth obsidian casing wrapped in Council-sealed magnetic thread. Unauthorized entry. Unauthorized content. Unauthorized presence. The chamber doors parted with an unceremonious hiss, revealing the Grand Assembly Hall in full formation. 13 elevated platforms surrounded the circular floor, each occupied by delegates of elder species cloaked in tradition and symmetry. Overhead, layered heads-up displays flickered with threat status updates, encoded for political digestibility, not truth. They blinked yellow, not red. That choice alone was doctrine in motion. Theron stepped into the center. No request to speak has been filed, came the voice of Grand Seer Exor Volnath, his crystalline torso casting fractured light into the center like a prism-turned interrogator. I'm not here to request, Theron said. He placed the data core on the display pedestal. It activated instantly, laser emitters shooting twin columns of blue light upward. Within seconds, a rotating model of the Vexar lattice appeared, spiraling trajectories overlaid with recent disappearances. Arari Prime now sat at the model's core. Theron's voice was sharp, but even. This is not theoretical. This is the future. You've labeled it anomaly. I name it pattern. Their curve isn't exploration, it's entrapment. A ripple of murmurs stirred across the chamber. The Drovar ambassador lowered his gaze. The Nullvex scribes paused their transcription. Seer Volnath did not blink. You bring classified military intelligence into council chambers, in violation of diplomatic protocol. Theron leaned closer. You speak of protocol, while systems vanish. What good is your peace if it cannot endure contact with reality? From the Threxan platform, Kolvorath stood. His layered robes hung like history draped across a statue. Do you know what peace required, Ambassador Myrric? What we buried to secure it. The Vexar are not new, they are echoes of what we became. Theron turned toward him. Then say it, let the chamber hear it, plainly. Kolvorath's mouth hardened into a line. We won the last galactic war through annihilation, not victory. We erased species. And to keep that peace, we erased the memory of those methods. Our treaties were written in absence. Theron absorbed the weight of it, then said, You didn't make peace, you paved over consequence. An Arari emissary stepped forward then, quiet but steady. Feathers gray, eyes hollow with age, he wore no translator. His words came in a cadence older than most listening could follow. We never truly forgot, the Arari said. We archived. The room fell into stillness, not quiet, stillness, as if even the lights refused to flicker. Volnath's voice rose again, slow and surgical. And you propose to unlock what we sealed, return to the weapons that nearly broke the stars. I propose we survive, Theron said. The Vexar aren't coming to negotiate. Councillor Veyun of the Bravari Collective stood then, half-draped in light-sensitive cloth, eyes hidden. And if we do act, do we become them? Theron let that question hang a moment longer than it needed. If peace is silence, he said, then why do we hear them scream? A shiver passed through the chamber, but the council had been built not to respond, but to remember how not to. The vote came. It was swift, clinical, and without discussion. 12-1. Earth stood alone. The verdict, non-interference. Any violation of treaty lines would be treated as unilateral aggression. The coalition, if it launched, would be an unsanctioned force. Earth would be expelled from the council. Defy us, Volnath concluded, and you forfeit your place among the stars. Theron collected the core without expression. Then we'll walk alone, he said. As he turned to leave, the lights above Earth's platform dimmed, one by one, a descending sequence like the slow extinction of memory. Outside the chamber, Bran was already waiting, standing at the edge of the corridor like a loaded verdict. Theron said nothing as he passed. He didn't need to. Bran followed. Back in the Earth enclave, the walls buzzed with encrypted bursts, coalition channels, delegates pulling their support, others doubling it. The alliance wasn't collapsing, it was shifting, becoming more dangerous, more real. Kellen sat at the corner of the room, eyes buried in blueprints pulled from a side core of the Arari archive, unmarked, buried in static, but still intact. Theron approached. You stayed behind. I had to know what we're risking, Kellen said. He tapped the display. A schematic unfolded, nested resonance shields, built not to deflect but to invert. The design pulsed like a lung. This wasn't a defense protocol, Kellen continued. It was meant to dismantle command structure, cognitive disassembly through feedback. A weapon for hive minds, Bran said. Kellen nodded slowly. But it wasn't Arari tech. The framework is older, much older. Theron narrowed his eyes. Then the archive is more than memory. It's a mirror, Kellen said, and the Vexar might be what's looking into it. Another transmission arrived. Arari outer systems. 3 now dark. The curve was no longer theoretical. Theron stepped toward the command table, input a layered cipher, and activated a dormant command stack. Coalition activation orders. Encrypted, distributed, undeniable. Bran crossed his arms. Council's already moving to counter. We've got fleet sensors on lockout. Supply routes watched. We don't need their ports, Theron said. We need their fear. He looked to Kellen. You're with us? Kellen hesitated, then nodded. I don't want to repeat the past, but I'm not letting them erase our future either. The channel chimed again. This time the message came from orbit, a Vexar signal, not broadcast, but echoed, mirrored by the archive itself. The war had already begun, and silence was no longer an option. Kellen stood at the chamber threshold, face pale, fists clenched like he was still gripping something he'd rather forget. His boots left faint marks on the dust that clung to the deck tiles, remnants from Arari vault transfer crates opened only hours ago. He didn't speak, didn't need to. His expression had already said too much. Theron turned away from the tactical table, sensing the air shift behind him. What did the archive show you? Kellen's voice came slower than usual. Not simulations, not projections, recordings. From the last war. Kellen shook his head. From the next one. At least, that's how it feels. He stepped forward, tapping his ID key to the plasma projector. The feed stuttered once, then ignited into a layered flickering display, Arari script overlaid by unfamiliar lattice strands. In the center, a spire-shaped structure emerged, shifting every few seconds, like it couldn't settle on a final form. That's the Vexar structure, Kellen said. But it wasn't built. It was grown, mapped into existence through a weaponized neural mesh, seeded across uninhabited systems. Theron narrowed his eyes. You're saying someone left a trail? I'm saying we did. The weapon lattice, it was ours. A legacy project abandoned and archived before the Accord. They called it sentient nullification architecture. Senna. Bran stepped into the room behind them, halfway through syncing external security nodes. He caught the tail end of the sentence and froze. You're telling me the thing wiping systems wasn't an enemy, it was a contingency? No, Kellen replied. It became one. When it lost its directive anchor, it reverted to its last known operational function, preserve by reduction, target dissonance, eliminate variables. And we're the variable, Bran muttered. Us and anything else that evolved while it slept. Theron leaned closer to the projection. Why now? Why reawaken after 12,000 years? We don't know, Kellen admitted. The AI thinks it might be gravitational echo drift, a ping caught in a resonance fold, or it could have been the Arari archive itself. Something inside it responded to Vexar's presence before the world was even scanned. The display flickered again. A new overlay appeared. Time-stamped battle notations, ship logs, signal fragments. Bran's eyes caught something first. A section of repeating glyphs looping. Every 6 seconds. They weren't warnings. They were echoes. A record of moments before system collapse. The run said it before anyone else could. It's predicting their deaths. Not predicting, Kellen corrected. Remembering, the archive isn't reacting to the Vexar, it's synchronizing with it. Every death recorded is playing out before it happens. A chill settled over the room that no atmospheric control could warm. The run stepped back from the display, mind moving faster than his body could keep pace. What about the resonance shields? Kellen pulled up a second schematic, Arari in origin, but augmented by Earth's adaptive filtration models and Drovar frequency regulators. They're ready. We can deploy them to key coalition fleets, maybe keep their minds from being shredded during contact. Bran snapped a data prism onto the table. Drovar disruptors are loaded. Their engineers say they'll fry any mesh coordinating structure inside 3 planetary widths. But there's a catch. Theron looked at him. Bran continued. Once fired, the node network collapses. Permanently. No recovery. No salvage. We're not disabling. We're erasing. Kellen hesitated. That includes the memory lattice. If we destroy the Vexar architecture, we may lose the only thing that knows what the lattice was meant to become. Theron absorbed that. And if we wait, Arari Prime goes dark within the next 9 cycles. Kellen answered. Bran's jaw tightened. So we strike first, or not at all. Theron moved to the central command console. A heads-up command stream scrolled across the interface, lines of conditional orders written weeks ago, ready for deployment. He keyed in the access phrase, Operation Null Bloom. Octave instantly. 8 fleet relays blinked green. The Coalition's buried command protocols had just been lit from beneath. We go silent from this moment on. Theron said. No more signals. No more transmissions. We're off the grid. Council will see this as defiance, Kellen said. They already do. Bran stepped away to coordinate fleet loading. Kellen lingered, his eyes still locked on the archive's unstable display. One section of it near the bottom glitched again. A sharp cut of visual noise, then a flicker. It repeated once, then again. A phrase began to form in composite glyphs. In a theater sequence, Kellen's spine stiffened. Theron, look at this. The glitch repeated again. Then with it came the looped sound. A voice, not recorded from the present, not broadcast from orbit, but remembered. It was Arari, distorted but still translated by the archive's ancient linguistic matrix. Sequence active. Fail-safe compromised. Echo must not complete. Theron didn't blink. They tried to shut it down once before, and failed. Kellen said. That means Null Bloom might not stop it either. Bran returned. Ships are positioning. Disruptors primed. What's the delay? Kellen didn't answer. He just pointed. The display changed again. This time a real-time view of Arari orbital space. Vexar strands had breached the outer satellites. No explosions. No beams. Just silence, curling into gravitational distortions that warped light itself. One by one, Alari's planetary defense grids folded inward, not shattered, but absorbed. Theron stared at the image and said nothing. Until he did. We don't delay, he said. We accelerate. He turned toward Bran. Position the fleet. Get the shields locked. Tell the Arari to prepare fallback zones. The Vexar doesn't want to fight. It wants to overwrite. We deny it the script. And if Null Bloom fails? Kellen asked. Theron stepped to the viewport. Outside, the sky blinked. Not with stars but with warnings. Then we become the blank space it can't predict. The archive lights flickered once more. This time they didn't return. They arrived in layers, not formation, like history tearing through the sky in slow-motion spirals. The Coalition fleet poured into Arari orbital space under blackout codes and dampened drives. Their silhouettes blurred against the starline. Drovar carriers, Arari pulse frigates, Earth's retrofitted shockcraft, even Nalvec prism scouts, whose hulls bent light around them like camouflaged shards. The system's gravity well bristled with tension, every orbit a noose tightening by the second. Theron stood at the command hub aboard the Earthship Callistor Arc, eyes scanning the heads-up projections fed through 10 independent streams. Each arc of data danced along translucent overlays, Vexar lattice density, shield integrity rates, frequency bleed, and scatter pattern deviations. No colors, just motion and heat, the language of battle before sound. Status, he called, voice sharp. Kellen's tone came clipped but clear from the secondary console. Resonance fields holding at 83%. Drovar disruptors synced. Arari scouts reporting initial incursion at the polar band. They're early, Bran muttered, already suited in combat rig. His voice came filtered through the tactical channel. They're coordinated, Kellen replied. This isn't a swarm, it's an incursion with memory. Outside the viewport, Vexar tendrils arced toward the inner moons. They didn't pulse or shine, they moved, like wires crawling across a nervous system too ancient to flinch. They laced around satellites, curved toward orbital platforms, bypassed weapon emplacements like they knew where the shields ended before they'd been fired. Theron nodded once. Begin Null bloom, he said. The first EM disruptor deployed near Orbit 3. The Drovar warship Gravenhold spun on its axis, core arrays unfurling with a resonant thrum that vibrated even through dampeners. Energy burst across the Vexar's node cloud, ripping the command strand apart like old webbing torn by wind. 3 Vexar stalk forms froze mid-movement. The lattice fragment splintered. Earth's lead frigate Yarrow II surged forward, targeting the exposed core. A direct hit followed. Light folded inward, but no explosion, just a ripple. The fragment reabsorbed into the void like memory collapsing on itself. They're adapting, Kellen said, watching 2 more Vexar units slide around the loss, bending into alternate formations. Arari scouts dove into the wake of the disruption. They released harmonic bursts from undercarriage generators, singing threads of resonance into the field. The sound was inaudible, except to the shields, which flickered like breath drawn through frost. Bran's wing pushed forward. Form phalanx theta. Push the arc. I want their flank scattered. Kexon fighter Jern-Tel clipped formation. Its forward array snapped wide, and without realignment, it fired blindly, impacting the trailing Nalvec ship Harmon Reach. The Nalvec vessel spun, clipped the Arari scout Kiranel, and spun into the atmosphere like a wounded thought. No flames, just a glow and then a hush. Redirect, Bran barked. Realign Group 7. Push the left column, do not engage the tail cluster yet. His commands were echoed across 10 channels. The coalition didn't fracture, but it faltered, enough for the Vexar to notice. From the shattered debris, 3 lattice fragments curled into tight spirals and split, not randomly. Each portion mirrored the others, sub-swarms coalescing like tactical phantoms. They've forked, Kellen said. 3-point engagement strategy. They've never done this before. Theron absorbed the map in silence. The display now showed not just an attack, but a learning curve. Disruptor 3, launch toward the midline, he said. Overload the front nodes, break their symmetry before they synchronize again. Bran's wing pushed deeper. The 10 racks fall, a Drovar hauler, retrofitted with long-range impact plating, took the lead. Behind it, Earth strike drones flooded into gaps, bouncing signal pings to keep formation tight. Then Bran saw it. Floating behind the Vexar lead, a structure collapsed, frozen in orbit like a discarded statue. He rotated his viewport feed, an old Earth colony module, E-Delta-03, insignia still barely etched along its side. The entire unit was encapsulated in lattice strands. Hollow burst on that structure, he ordered. The projection snapped up across his auxiliary screen. People, walking, eating, children, barely moving. Then, stopped, a moment stretched, frozen in time. Then it began playing backwards, bodies rising, reversing, a scene being retracted, not recalled. The lattice had recorded them, not just killed, stored them. Bran snapped out of it. Strike formation now. Collapse the flank and push. We're burning this memory out of their spine. He relayed coordinates to Theron. They're using us to remember what they lost. We don't just destroy them, we erase their recall point. Theron's face hardened. Understood. He keyed into the mainstream. All wings target core relay nodes. Execute collapse pattern. Begin grid shutdown. From orbit, the coalition surged. Disruptors fired in calculated bursts. Every hit shattered one more piece of the Vexar's command logic. The nodes dimmed. The field fractured. In the center of the Arari orbital arc, resonance frequencies began to shift. As the last harmonic generator overloaded, the shielding glowed, not in color but in tone. A trembling frequency, neither mechanical nor musical, spilled across every ship. The coalition heard it, felt it. Sacrifice made audible. The Arari scouts overloaded their final drives. Their ships folded inward, cores burning clean, shields tearing apart the final Vexar strands that breached orbital command. The Vexar retreated, not in panic, but in silence, like a wave pulling back before a deeper strike. Theron stood at the command table. Every ship was marked, losses tallied, shields depleted. Kellen stared at the display. It worked. Theron didn't nod. He just watched as one final Vexar strand curled away toward deep space, dragging with it fragments of the collapsed Earth colony. Not destroyed, he murmured. Just delayed. Bran's voice crackled over comms. We held. Theron leaned closer to the command node. Then we finish the memory before it returns. They thought the strike was the end. It was only the pause before the unraveling. Theron stood at the forward observation tier of the Callister arc, face lit by a dim wash of tactical readouts. The heads-up display showed the orbital wreckage, fractured Arari scout hulls, trailing heat traces, Drovar disruptors still spinning down from overload, Vexar nodes drifting like pieces of a shattered constellation. Status, he asked quietly. Kellen, seated beside the archive uplink, replied without turning. Fleets are splintering. Varn engineers pulled their atmospheric rigs. Kexan comms have gone dark. Bravari ships are falling back to neutral orbit. They saw us win, Theron said. They saw us survive, Kellen corrected. There's a difference. The display blinked again. Vexar fragments weren't gone, they'd just changed position. Smaller now, narrower bands of black light twisting matter, but still moving in coordinated arcs, like severed nerves trying to reconnect. Bran's voice cut through the comm line, raw from orbital strain. That wasn't enough. Theron's jaw flexed. We hit their relay, collapsed their local net. They're bleeding. They're rebuilding. Bran interrupted. Not at planetary scale. At root level, beneath the crust. Kellen froze. Subsurface. Bran confirmed. I scanned the debris drift. There's a lattice formation threading through Alari's crust, a backup hive. Hidden, waiting for this exact outcome. Theron turned toward him, slow and steady. Coordinates? Bran sent them. A hollow sphere beneath the northern continent, rotating in subharmonic sync with the archive's outer shell. A fail-safe. One final core. Kellen tapped the panel. We can't get a fleet that deep, not without atmospheric ignition, not without burning half the planet. Theron glanced to the side. What about shield breach? Too slow, Kellen said. Bran's voice returned, quieter. I'll take the Yarrow tech. Theron stiffened. She's already half broken. She'll carry the resonance load. I'll fly her straight through the lattice and rupture the core from inside. Kellen stood. You won't survive that. Bran didn't answer. Not immediately. Then that colony I saw. The one suspended in the node field. It was mine. I watched them walk backwards into death. Watched them be unlived. The channel went quiet. Theron stepped back from the console, gaze falling on the floor, on the mark left by Bran's boot when he'd last stood there. Still fresh, still anchored. You're not doing this for revenge, Theron said. No, Bran replied. For memory. The Yarrow tech launched with no escorts, no fanfare. Its hull still scored from the orbital fight, patched by Drovar salvage welders in under 2 hours. The resonance payload had been mounted inside the core chamber, Arari augmented, Earth stabilized. Its signature could not be masked. The Vexar would see it coming. That was the point. In the archive control hall, Kellen monitored the Vexar's response from deep within the vault. Tendrils curled toward the surface like roots reacting to flame. The subsurface hive activated layer by layer. Lattice nodes spun like gears without friction. Theron's voice crackled over the private line. Can we sink it? Kellen tapped a final command. If he reaches the detonation point, I can fire the planetary pulse to match. It'll multiply the disruption. And if he doesn't? Kellen didn't answer. The Yarrow tech streaked through Alari's upper sky, trailing 3 waves of magnetized ash. Vexar subswarms arced upward, forming a barrier net. Bran cut left, then dove beneath, punching through the first field with a forward burst. The ship buckled. Hull alarms screamed. Bran kept his eyes locked forward. He crossed into the crust breach at 7.2 seconds before lattice contact. Inside the command core, he pulled out the melted service pin from E-Delta-03, held it against the dash, pressed the record button. Whoever finds this, he said, breath even, don't forget what silence costs. Don't forget what we stored in the dark to pretend we were better. He looked at the pin. And don't erase us. Keep the memory. The ship pierced the final coil of the lattice. From orbit, Theron saw the first flicker, resonance bleeding upward like static given form. Kellen triggered the pulse. The archive tower flared red. A tremor passed through the world, not tectonic, but sonic, a sound with no air, no medium, just frequency. The Vexar field imploded, not in fire, not in noise, in absence. Across Ilari orbit the quantum holograms froze. Children paused mid-wave. Engineers locked in moments of escape, entire cities preserved in death shadows. One by one they blinked out. The lattice collapsed. In the control center, Kellen fell to his knees, ears bleeding. It's gone, he whispered. The hive is gone. Silence returned. Not the same silence. This one lingered. Theron stood before the viewport. No motion, no lights, just a drifting field of remnants. A shadow moved. Bran's service pin, launched free from the Yarrow's collapse, tumbled into view. It spun slowly, reflected the nearby starlight just once, then disappeared into the dark. In the vault below, a chamber wall split open, not from damage, from permission. Inside, a single room, walls blackened, symbols pulsing faint red. Theron stepped in slowly. At the center, a sealed module, small, marked with an identifier they'd never seen before. In a theater, stage 2, he didn't speak, didn't move. Outside, sparks fell from the disabled Vexar coils like slow-burning ashes. A memory, ending, or beginning. The verdict came in waves, not shouted, not delivered from podiums, whispered, veiled in statements wrapped in ceremony, condemnations stitched into declarations of regret. The council did not declare war, it simply withdrew its hand, and with it, the illusion of unity. Earth was censured, not for failure, but for clarity. Grand Seer Exar Volnath's address to the council chambers was brief and unambiguous. Clarity, unchecked, is a dangerous form of power, he said, translucent frame dim under the fractured lights of the Nexus chamber. When memory is used as a weapon, even survival is an act of rebellion. Theron wasn't there to hear it. He had already left. The Alari, though publicly silent, began to record everything. Their vaults, once sealed by cultural commandment, opened layer by layer. What they found wasn't just tactical history. It was story, faces, final words. Moments lost to the lattice, now returned to light. Whispers followed. Across 10 systems, archive fragments seeded themselves into smaller repositories, distributed like spores from a tree no longer willing to contain its own roots. Delegates took copies. Archivists fled. What was buried refused to stay quiet. The coalition, once bound by necessity, fractured under the weight of aftermath. The Drovar returned to their core worlds, claiming debts had been paid in full. They offered no further explanation. The Kexan, whose admiral betrayed the coalition for amnesty, were denied entry to all diplomatic ports. Their ships scattered. Most disappeared into unregistered corridors of dark space. Nalvec scouts went quiet. Varn engineers dissolved their forward projects. The Brelvari left behind only their medships, now stationed in orbit over Ilari, tending to those whose minds bore the strain of lattice proximity. Kellen remained on Ilari, not to fight, not to advise, but to witness. The vault accepted him. He slept beneath whispering walls that never stopped breathing old names. Theron did not return to Earth. His ship, unarmed and refitted for deep drift, departed without broadcast. No destination filed, no escort. He had refused exile, but he accepted distance. For some men, silence was punishment. For him, it became the final directive. His days were spent recording, not logs, doctrine, memory defense, a philosophy of retention without repetition, a manual of survival, not through forgetting, but by remembering responsibly. He wrote of Bran, of the pin that caught starlight before vanishing, of Kellen, who turned away from the Council's comfort to seek buried truth, of the Arari, who chose to release the ghosts rather than let them scream in locked corridors. His voice echoed across neural recordings, calm, methodical, untouched by bitterness. It was not a war journal, it was an invitation. If history is a wound, then memory is the scar that teaches us where not to cut again. He called for an end to doctrinal suppression, for archives to be shared, not hidden, for defense protocols based on openness, not reaction. He proposed that every system keep one vault, not for weapons, but for warnings. None of it reached the Council, but someone else was listening. One morning, if mornings existed in deep space, Theron woke to a change in his ship's ambient field. The archive had sent something, a final packet. No encryption, no ceremony, just light. The display bloomed across the heads-up array, slowly, without sound. A fleet, not forming, remembering itself. Hundreds of vessels, arrayed in a configuration nearly lost to time, shapes once shelved as theoretical, weapons that Earth had never designed, yet mirrored its early experimental frameworks. But it wasn't Earth's design. It was something older, something that had used humanity's innovation to awaken again. The image flickered once, then froze. Theron stared at it for a long time. He didn't speak, he just turned off the display. He spent the next 12 hours recording one final message. He didn't name the fleet, didn't speculate. He only described the path that led here, the choices made, the truths unearthed, and the silence broken. Then he activated a transmission beacon, short range only, and locked the message into drift. Not for the Council, not for Earth, for anyone who would listen. Somewhere years later, a salvage vessel drifted beyond a collapsed jump corridor, its hull scraped by gravity, turbulence, and time. Inside, a junior officer swept old signal bands, hoping for beacon flares or lost cargo pings. She found the loop. It activated on contact. Theron appeared, older, still. His voice was calm, unhurried. If you're watching this, then silence has returned. And if it has, then you know what that means. It means they're coming back. Or maybe they never left. It means memory failed. So let this be your first defense. Don't forget. His image flickered slightly, subspace distortion tugging at the feed. What we bury does not stay buried. What we hide returns as shadow. What we erase re-etches itself in deeper places. You cannot fight what you refuse to remember. His hands rested on the edge of a small console, the background quiet, lit only by ambient stars behind him. Keep your records, keep your names, keep your dead. We won once, but only because we listened. Now it's your turn. The message ended, then began again. The salvage officer watched it twice, then activated full archive recording. Because some things weren't meant to be lost, and far beyond her system, in the dark quiet where forgotten wars once slept, a fleet reassembled. Its shape was familiar, but this time it would be seen. Theron's hologram continued, endless, on a loop, not static, remembering.